Welcome to the Grit and Grain podcast, where we explore and celebrate the craft beer industry, community, and history in Tacoma, Washington, and surrounding Pacific Northwest areas. Thank you so much for hanging out. Let's get to it. Welcome to the pilot episode of the Grit and Grain podcast. My name is Matt, and then I'm here with Sean Jackson and Ron Swarner, who hopefully, if you're listening to this, you know these guys. If you don't, you certainly should. But we're going to get to know them a whole bunch today and every time we do this. How are you guys?
Fantastic.
Good. So yeah, this whole hour is a pilot, so we're kind of figuring shit out. But yeah, this will be good, and we'll kind of talk about what we're doing here and how we got here and why we're doing this and why we think it's probably important. But I guess before all of that, what are you guys drinking? Ron, I know what Sean's drinking. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking the Wayfinder Czech as Fuck.
Oh, all right. It's
First edit, Ron Swarner.
I know.
Nice.
That's the first fuck was Ron?
It's literally the name.
I would have bet my next paycheck it wouldn't have been Ron.
I know. It's really the odds are great if you had your money on Ron.
Well, you invited Grandpa Simpson.
Okay, dude.
Don't really have a radio voice.
There you go.
But you invited me anyway, and thank you.
So, like, Czech as Fuck is funny because it might be the newest beer that exists that I go, damn, that beer's fucking classic. Because it's only a few years old, but it's like already such a fucking legendary example of that beer from this insane brewery that, like, when I see it, I'm just like, oh, it's fucking classic. Like, in my head, that's what's going on. Yeah. But it's like still like a super fresh, like, amazing example of this super classic style, which you would expect from Wayfinder, I guess. And then what are you drinking, Sean?
I have the Crux 2018 wheat wine, bourbon barrel aged wheat wine.
Damn. Hey, Sean, what's a wheat wine?
So, sub-style of barley wine. Higher portion of wheat in the grain bell itself. And it lends a little more lightness to the body and a tartness that is perceived well with all the wonderful, rich, massive maltiness. And then you throw it in a bourbon barrel and...
Okay. So after that whole pitch, can I take a sip of that? Because now it just sounds really good.
Of course.
I think I've had that before, but... Yeah, son of a bitch.
Yeah, there is
that's delicious.
one of the better examples. Mad River did Rorschach was a good example of what a wheat wine should be.
Yeah.
Full Sail had done one.
Oh, sure.
And that turned out fantastic. I know Hales had taken a run at one that turned out really good.
Brewery's got a couple of famous ones out there too.
Yeah, but it's still a fairly uncommon style.
For sure. Which is a shame actually, because it's so like it's a shame because it's like such a cool style and it's like so interesting.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that it's so rare because it's super easy to drink for being like 12% plus sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It drinks like a fucking port. Like you can have it in like a port glass and it's like it has all these overlapping flavors with that.
Comes to one complaint I have is why are port glasses so small? Like
it seems really inefficient.
Looks like a shot glass. I don't know. I have problems that way.
I can see Sean like ordering a port in a restaurant and then getting it and then just like, what is this shit? Like, can you make it a double? I'll have a double Tawny 20 here.
Please.
Does that come in pints or? Anyway, so I'm drinking Lumberbeard. There was much rejoicing hazy IPA, which is phenomenal
and fantastically named.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they've been really.
This
great
is a
with
silly
that.
place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's new school, crazy, super pale, Azaka, Talus, and a couple other like kind of fresh new hops, but it's delicious. Yeah, shit. So I guess the whole story behind this podcast, we should probably explain what we're doing here. It kind of came up randomly, but it's been like kind of a collection of ideas that we've all sort of thrown around for, I guess, a couple of years, and have finally, figured out how to put it all together. But it probably kind of started with Sean's fireside chat idea. Honestly, the whole thing was to like, get some of the guys here who he's been connected with for a long time, who have made insane impacts to this industry and to the craft beer community. And those guys are here sometimes just having a beer, which is heinous, because if people had any fucking idea how important they've been to like the progression of like the beer world, like, I don't know, I have a tough time not coming here and just fangirling over these people. But so Sean's whole idea was like, I want to like, sit in the fucking red room at Parkway and talk to these guys, and maybe some folks will come and hang out, and they can tell their story and like provide some context as to like what they've done and what they've contributed to. And even if you haven't enjoyed their beer directly, you've probably enjoyed some beers that were inspired by the work that these guys have done, and like, which is awesome. But then, I don't know, we kind of just sat down and figured we should just do that exact thing, but just mic people up so that more than, the few people who can fit in the small room can listen to it. Yeah. And hopefully when those guys do grace Tacoma or the Parkway with their presence, you guys will come out and have a beer with those guys, because that's what they love. Come and drink their beer in front of them and enjoy it in front of them. And, if you're a good cook, you probably understand the feeling of somebody like consuming a thing in front of you that you did and like enjoying it. It's like the most therapeutic like shit ever. And when a brewer does it, like when you enjoy a brewer's beer in front of them, it's a new level of that. It's their life's work in a glass, and it's science and art and all that shit. And like, when those guys come here, like hopefully, I don't know, hopefully that everybody gets a chance to hear those stories, and that's kind of the whole point, is that we'll be able to tell them. But we have some other cool stuff planned too. But Ron has actually been talking about a podcast for a long time too, and kind of your own ideas about it.
Yeah, the original plan was to do with producer or engineer. Are you an engineer or a producer or both?
I'm both.
Okay. With Doug Mackey.
This is Doug, by the way.
To do it inside
Everyone.
Peaks and Pints and kind of just have random people come up and chat and make it a little bit more pop culture-y. But,
sure.
And then I did the Suds Pop series in the side room.
That's
where
right.
we paired bands, and Doug was one of them, and brewers. And I had Pat Jansen from Matchless in, and I had Brad from Stoop.
Yeah.
And the science got deep.
Oh, yeah.
And it was incredibly enjoyable. And
the
I wish
nerd
I
talk
had
I love.
recorded that.
Yeah.
It was amazing. But, I mean, we sit around and talk about beer, and because of the privileges, not the privileges, but the connections we have brewers come in, and the conversation just gets amped up even a little bit more.
Sure.
So I think opening it up to the public and for them to contribute either through social media or slapping our heads on the street and saying, love that, or here's what I would do next time.
Sure.
Everybody's going to have a chance to talk about beer.
Yeah.
Hopefully through this podcast.
For sure.
I mean, I wanted to do it because it's fun, but also it's a learning experience. Also, it's going to elevate beer.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, one of the things I like is hope to get some of the old guard in through here, because I mean, it's our craft beer market right now is insane. Like it's incredible beer all over. It's all over Washington. It's all over the country. Like you can find good beer in places you think you wouldn't.
Sure.
Just have to work a little bit harder.
Sure.
Whereas we are spoiled rotten up here.
We really are. Dude, we really are.
You get great beer at like any freaking bar in Washington.
That is mostly true.
Along the West Coast. But a lot of the older guard, like the stories of how the market used to be, and the moves they made, and mistakes too. And especially you actually get some good brewers in here, like Best stories are the things you fucked up because those are stories. Everybody's got them.
That's true.
And they are fantastic.
But they don't always cost tens of thousands of dollars.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But, just kind of, that's fun. But, yeah, it's nice there's a lot of great, new folks on the market. It'd be fun to delve into where people came from, their pedigree. How did you end up at this brewery? So yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think it is too, man. And I don't know. I don't think there's a ton of options out there for people to even like get the context of what they're drinking. Like, there's, especially in the Northwest, people do know good beer from great beer, like really distinctly, which doesn't totally exist in a lot of other parts of the country. I travel a lot. There's plenty of great beer out there, but even other big metropolitan areas don't totally have like the dynamism that like the Pacific Northwest does. And I mean, a lot of that weirdly stems from Tacoma, which is crazy because like so much of what craft beer is today was like born in Tacoma like 140 years ago. And that's like it's like this crazy hidden history that people don't even like totally know. Like people know chunks of it, but it's not totally pieced together. And a huge bit of this podcast actually will be kind of contextualizing like the history of beer really around the entire country, but especially in the Pacific Northwest, and how so much of it was actually born in Tacoma, mostly because we have ports and that's where beer goes.
Right.
Like, but yeah, man, I mean, really from 1880 up to like Prohibition, and then a bunch of like crazy shit after that. There's so much that went on that led to those guys that Sean is talking about, like picking this craft up, taking it to the level that it is now, and then evolving it into like the insane dynamic, like fast-paced beer market that we have in Washington and the Pacific Northwest in general. And it doesn't exist anywhere else. And I have the feeling it's because we were like Tacoma was such a crazy port town, or at least a chunk of it is because Tacoma was such a crazy port town, and beer is like in the DNA of this entire region.
I mean, there's a lot of people that don't know that the hops originally came from Puyallup before Yakima.
Yeah,
we're that was that close to Puyallup.
Yeah,
and then the
like
fact
20
that,
minutes away.
Yeah, we were the train hub too before Seattle took it away.
Yeah,
we were the
which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like it was because of beer. Like it really like beer drove all of that super early industrialization, which happened all over the world, but it happened in Tacoma in this like crazy way. And there are still brands that exist today that you guys would have no idea actually started as like a separate company in Tacoma, and then either was bought or consolidated by brands that you probably drink every day and have no idea started even just a few miles from where you live, which is crazy. I think that's a huge chunk of what we're also trying to do here is like I think that most people around here can see that like craft beer is a huge deal in this area, but nobody really gets why it's so important. Like we all love it, and we all have this huge like appreciation for. I mean, we have like 20 local breweries in Tacoma, or in even just the zip codes outside of it. So like, there's a ton of beer here, and there's a ton of really good beer in the Northwest, and like. How is it so deep in our DNA that we can like foster a market and an industry that is so crazy ahead of the rest of the game? And I have the feeling it's because there's just something like innate in this whole community, in this whole town, that kind of connects that. And so I'm hoping that maybe after a few episodes of exploring the history and the guys who are actually picking up that history and continuing with it today, that everybody will have some context as to why it's such a big deal here.
Yeah.
Yahoo!
Well said.
I have to applaud that.
Should have brought Kleenex.
I know. And I'm
I just wanted to
beer.
duck some responsibilities at the house and drink beer. It's like,
we could do both.
by being over my head
do
here.
two things.
Well, we'll see about that.
I gotta go, honey. I'm building my community. No, you're fucking not. Well, shit. That kind of leads, I guess, to the next topic, which is how the hell did we get here? Ron,
How did we?
How did you get here?
A Jeep.
That's a great answer. Everybody has a short and a long answer. The Jeep is the short answer.
I'm old, so my explanation is going to be probably long.
That's fine. We got time.
I've been in Tacoma all my life. I grew up in Lakewood, but it was a Tacoma address then.
Right.
And like everybody else, I started drinking in 8th grade. And
Amen.
Yeah, and fell in love with it. And I graduated from Lakes High School in 82, and we were 82 Brews. We loved beer.
Your actual
the
identity?
entire class. We had one of our close friends in that class. Parents had to move to Florida, and we had a house to ourselves.
Yeah,
and it was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And then I went to UW, and in high school is when I really discovered beer, because I was drinking Lowenbrau, and then I discovered Killian's Red.
Oh shit!
Oh man, that changed my world. This is flavorful. Yeah. And then so I went off
it was so next level at that time.
I know, but think about what we had.
Oh no, I'm not even being. I'm being totally serious.
No. And then went off to UW and to try to get an econ degree, which I did, and I was there when everything started. Yeah. So suddenly I had friends from come up from California, so I started drinking Green Label in '83.
Damn.
And then
which is like when it came out.
Yeah. And then
for anybody unfamiliar, what is Green Label?
It's Sierra Nevada. Pale Ale.
Yeah.
And it wasn't technically the first, but it's damn near the first. And
sure.
Godfather of craft beer.
Yeah, I would agree with
New
that.
Albanian was the first, I believe. Mm-hmm. Or you can even go back to Anchor. And
Maytag. Yeah.
And then Red Hook started. Widmer, Bridgeport, Thomas Kemper, all of them right there in those Kemper, 84, 85, 86.
Yep.
And I just, yes, please.
Yeah.
And graduated, and then Pike opened, and George started Maritime Pacific, and and Burt Grant was around, so I went to Yakima because I had a friend who lived in Wenatchee, and I saw the kilt, I drank the Scottish Ale, I drank the Perfect Porter.
Right.
It was I found my people.
Sure.
And then, but I grew up in a newspaper business, mm-hmm. and so my family published the papers for, back then, Fort Lewis and McCord. Okay. It wasn't Joint Base Lewis yet. So that's how that was my summers, running ad copy and delivering papers and all that.
Yeah.
When I was young, and then decided not to be a stockbroker, but went into the publishing business and immediately started newspapers.
Fuck my degree.
Yeah, literally. I started a video publication in '86 because Beta went to VHS and the Macintosh came out.
Damn, son.
And
you've been on the cutting edge for 40 years, Ron.
Yeah, I know. And so I got to start playing around with the Macintosh, and I got hooked. And so I was writing. I'd watch like 15 Clint Eastwood movies and write about it.
Oh man,
it was wacky. And
sounds like a rough life.
Yeah. But anyway, and then I started a entertainment publication like around 1990, mm-hmm. 89, 90. It was called Choices. And the grunge scene happened, and it was the time of my life. I was so I was living in Tacoma then, but and except when I was at UW in Seattle, and I know this is going to be a long one, but I moved back to Seattle and lived downtown during the grunge years.
Shit.
Yeah, and I drank beer. I drank a lot of Pike and Maritime, and
sure,
and. It was a time of my life, but I was writing about it. I was covering the music scene. I was covering the restaurant scene. I was writing about beer.
Yeah.
And that morphed into the Tacoma City paper in '97, because I tried to take a stab at alternate news weeklies because I was reading the Village Voice back then.
Yeah.
And that's the exact same time when The Stranger started. I go, okay, this is going to be tough.
Okay, what's my next move?
Yeah, but we kept it up a couple of years, but I couldn't convince the auto dealers and the real estate people that an alternative news weekly in Tacoma was worth supporting, and so
sure.
it lasted 3 years, and then I got lost in the woods, came back, started the Weekly Volcano in 2001, and that that took off. And it went slow because I basically it was a family business. It's this is what we're doing.
Sure.
They didn't say yes or no. I just did it.
Yeah.
And then
there's a lot of, I'm sure, people who are familiar with the volcano but have no idea where it comes from. So this is
originated from a military newspaper.
Yeah.
Just does not make sense. And then so that started really taking off, and I started covering restaurants and bars. I started Tacoma Restaurant Week and the Best of Tacoma issues, and I created
which are all still iterations are all still in existence today.
And then I started a happy hour app where I went around to 250 to 300 bars in the South Sound and and went there and wrote about it and put it on the app, and that was a great education. That's how I learned where everything was.
Sure.
I knew because I grew up in town, but man, and a lot of them are gone. A lot of those places are gone now, sadly. And I'm writing my beer and I'm doing all that, and then I got really serious about it because I was falling in love with it. And I started a column in the Volcano called New Beer Column, because every week it was a new beer column. And I fell in love with it and the people, and I started meeting people, and I got a chance to go down to Sierra Nevada, the beer camp, and
do
beer camp 175 and brew a beer.
Oh, man.
And I just wrote about everybody and met a lot of people, and advertising wasn't doing really great in newspaper business. And I went to my brother, my brother and I bought the company in 2007, and I said, hey, Ken, I think I want to do something else. And I just jumped in. And so for 18 months, I myself and started building it, and then I realized I needed some help because I didn't know how to really run a bar, but I knew two guys who looked very similar who did. And I knew them since 2002.
Of course.
The Peterson brothers, Robbie and Justin, who were amazing people, and I started Peaks and Pints with them. And then the rest is history, I guess, so they say. So that's kind of my story. And I'm still writing. The Peaks and Pints website's pretty dynamic, and I'm writing daily on it. So I still get to have that pleasure that I had before.
We all know that you're the hardest.
But I'm also,
worker.
but I'm also lifting kegs, and I'm, stocking coolers and fixing glycol and all that other stuff.
I have a question for you then. So. And we've talked about this, I guess, but I've never really asked you this. But you went from writing about beer really for a long time to kind of jumping into the sort of direct beer business side, right? What changed for you about your perception of this industry when you went from just writing about it to actually operating a business in it?
Nice question. Well, that's a really tough one, actually.
Okay, I'll ask it a different way.
Okay.
What is some bullshit that you did not know existed in this industry when you were just writing about it, and then you opened a business and you were like, "Son of a bitch"?
Yeah. I didn't. I learned quickly how to move kegs around. I destroyed my back, which.
I was going to say,
literally destroyed my back several times.
You went from carpal tunnel to sciatica.
I learned that beer doesn't slide easily down those sliders in the cooler. They fall over. And if they're on the top level, you have to get a keg out, stand on it, and reach over. If something breaks every day in a bar, because we're a restaurant bar and tap room. Something breaks every day. And Robbie and Justin told me that. I didn't believe them, but it's
so
true.
Fucking true.
But I've made lifelong close friends in this industry.
Yeah,
I didn't realize how tight beer was and how it's such a welcoming and nurturing community.
Yeah,
it is amazing.
So actually, the reason I asked that is because I figured that would probably be your answer.
It is.
When people have asked me that, what is it about this industry? The people is the first fucking thing that comes to my head.
Yeah.
I see a lot of these folks every day, and these are people that I this doesn't totally exist in this sort of way in other beer, in other like territories, metropolitan territories where people are selling beer against each other, but like especially around Tacoma, like, and really a lot of the Northwest, like the people that you are selling beer against, at least on my side, but I mean, you also operate a bar, you're technically competing with other bars that people could be choosing, but the craft beer industry and community is like so crazy welcoming that like it never feels like that. And the people who really like in any other industry you might be competing against end up just being people that you would like throw yourself in traffic for.
Totally. I'm sitting next to one right now. I'm sitting next to Sean, and I would do anything for him.
Yeah.
I mean, I love him.
Yeah.
And I love him too. And real quick note, like, it's funny because that is part of the craft industry, but I have heard some just God blessedly fantastic stories about the old school, big houses and the sabotage.
Dude,
I did a lot of draft work.
The Wild fucking West.
And it was crazy how devious people would be to...
Hell yeah.
The best I've ever heard, and there was tons of them, is a BB in your draft line. Because it was... I've done some draft tech work, and it is literally impossible to find and diagnose. Like, there's all these functions you go through. This should be pouring this and that, and it just you knock your head against the wall and
try to find this unknown turbulence.
You're concussed, but it was old school fucking badass rock.
Hell yeah,
like gangster stuff, and it is completely different. Like, and a lot of it, the big beer industry, like, obviously, if you've heard anything or any stories, kind of neglected the craft beer industry for a long time.
Sure.
And made the mistake of letting it get some roots and start to flourish. And then they spent a lot of time dirty fighting the way for that, small piece of the pie that they started to lose more and more every year. And
so you feel like you feel like there was a culture shift between like kind of this like hardcore sort of like Wild West like industry practices that you might see.
Absolutely.
And then like kind of as craft beer started to take a hold, you noticed that like culture shift where people weren't quite as like intense in their competition.
I don't think the culture shift ever really happened on the larger scale.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't fucking care about the little kids, right? You were never taking a big enough piece of the pie to worry about.
Yeah.
And then they were.
Interesting.
That's when
so
you
everybody had to
like, you ever seen the movie Beer Wars? Like, and that gets into some, you're not really dealing with the product. You're dealing with shelf space and advertising,
real estate,
all the psychology behind marketing and pushing things into people's heads.
Like so
you're not really dealing with the product, and that was, that's what craft beer did. And, it was a great community, and still is. Still is. I mean, it's... So, okay.
Hang on, hold the thought. I'm actually going to ask you the same question. We're going to take a really quick break, but I do have the same question for you right when we come back.
Okay, I'll do it your way.
Yeah, shit, and we're back. Okay. Thanks for hanging out. Okay, what were you going to say?
So a lot of this leads into, for me, Sean Jackson, I've been a restaurant industry kid since I was very, very young, 15.
It's actually how you and I met.
I've been doing it my whole life, but my intro, working-wise, into the craft beer industry was in Mud Shark Brewing Company in 1999, so I was some sort of early 20 years old. Mm-hmm. This is down in Lake Havasu, Arizona. And I had been up here in the Northwest, and I had some great time underage drinking. The Thomas Kemper.
Just so everybody knows, we've heard Thomas Kemper a couple times now. Yeah. Just to be real clear to everybody, we're going to talk about them a whole lot, because if you guys had any fucking idea how important that particular place was to this entire region, like, it would, we're excited to tell you all about it.
Channel 253 disclaimer about underage drinking. Continue.
Yeah.
So I knew a guy who used to underage drink. And, being that age, like, I'll be honest, he told me that, like, Pete's Wicked Strawberry Blonde, like, he would crush those. Like, the Henry Weinhard's, like, Blue Boar was fantastic. Like, there was a lot of great things that he told me he had up here. At an underage.
You're so far past the statute of limitations.
And then we,
You're fine.
back to Arizona. So
You're fine.
he goes down to Arizona, and it's supposed to be a brief amount of time there, and it was a different awakening, but similar. Like instead of the Anheuser-Busch, it was like, hey, let's crack some Genesee cream ales and some Newcastles and Heinekens and fuck yeah, some Killian's Red because it's badass. Like it's craft all over the place in Arizona. And one of my ways to work my way back up to the Northwest was I got a job in a little microbrewery in Arizona, Mudshark Brewing, and I just wanted to make enough money to get my ass back up here. And I was completely smitten by the brewery and the brewing process. I was the first assistant brewer at Mudshark Brewing. I basically harassed the head brewer at the time, Captain Ron Chifo, one of the most amazing people I've met in my life. I was serving, I was waiting tables, but on my downtime, I was just always, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing that? And so I worked for a couple weeks, basically doing all the shit jobs. He was trying to weed me out, and it didn't work. I was like, you're a freaking tick,
You're like, nah, man, I fucking want this. I'll shovel your wet grain all day.
So, I ended up being the first assistant brewer at Mudshark Brewing, and the love for the craft beer process, that was it. It was game over. I was kind of wandering around, never really passionate about anything I was doing other than making money in the restaurant industry, and that was my passion. And it was an interesting place to do it because it's Lake Havasu City, Arizona, and it's one of the most big brewery house marketed places in the fucking world. Like,
sure.
Anything that happens there is all your boats, your this and that, sponsored by. So to have a small brewery, it was really you were educating people. And
like on the industry, or just as better?
Other than the lowest common denominator beer that everyone wanted.
Sure.
What flavors were, what ales were, like the simple concepts of
sure.
the difference between ales and lagers. A lot of it was education, and really, really thankful for, thank God Sierra Nevada and New Belgium and Fat Tire and Widmer Hef. Widmer Hef for us down there, and fucking Blue Moon was.
Sure.
These were gateway beers that helped us bring people into the world of more flavor than you are used to.
Sure.
Right.
If you like that, try this.
Right.
If you like that, try
and you're
this.
pushing things that aren't necessarily new.
Yep.
Right? Lagering is not the most recent of beer styles.
It's at least 1,000 years old.
So a lot of things happening before that. So
how long have caves existed? Okay, that's about it.
Yeah.
For us down there, a lot of it was changing hearts and changing minds. A lot of free samples. A lot of try this. And this.
How
is
fulfilling was that part of that, right?
It was fucking awesome.
You're in like this insane vacuum of like really, really like unidimensional beer, and you guys are producing the thing that is kind of the next stage of this, right? Like, how insanely satisfying is it to hand somebody a beer when they've only ever had like really one flavor their entire life, picking a beer, and then they're like, God damn, this is awesome. Like,
I gotta imagine it's like the Crusades. Like every fucking conversion you get, like. It's another virgin in heaven or whatever,
Okay.
I don't know how the system works.
that is not the fucking comparison I was going for.
No, but it's true, man. Like, change a heart, change a mind.
I guess, man,
enlighten,
I'm not asking
open
you
them
about
up
the
to the good
Inquisition.
book. But so here's the thing: is like that little thing. It was so us against them.
Sure.
And that was the thing.
And
that I
Goliath
thought
was way bigger back then.
Way
like
fucking
at least
bigger.
relative.
Way bigger.
Way bigger.
And I mean, truthfully, too, like wine had just come through this huge resurgence.
Sure.
Especially American wine. Like this is a big deal.
That really only happened in
Right?
like late 60s and like 70s. A lot of people listening might have seen Somm on Netflix. You might know the story of guys like Fred Dame, people who like really brought wine, like craft wine, like into the spotlight. It happened way earlier than beer, which is kind of why there's this crazy sort of gap between where craft beer is at and craft wine is at, and that happened 30 or 40 years earlier, but like that around that time, wine had really just started to do that sort of thing, and it was crazy. And it's so interesting how different it was back then, and how it's almost relatively like elevated to the same degree that beer has, but it's just there's this 30 or 40 year gap.
Absolutely, and and there's things as the young man version of me loved about beer was the history, the heritage, the craft. I preferred it above any other alcohol production because I felt like the amount of colors that you had at your availability to paint the picture with was far superior to any other alcohol production.
Say more things like that, Jesus.
Seriously, like it's
more Kleenex,
a lot of
God damn.
because all the
Sean's
components
so top
like,
shelf with his fucking analogies. I'm real glad you're here,
give me
man.
a second,
Just so
buddy.
you know,
Give me
dude.
a second. We'll be scrubbing the floors soon enough. But like truly, like there's so much that goes into wine.
Sure,
That's
sure.
Based on your growing process, and all these things are still components of brewing.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like your choices in making your finished product and your skill. And,
Sure.
I mean, that's
Sure.
everyone's the craft, and it's an art, and it's like it's a craft and it's an art if you understand fucking science.
Okay, so
Otherwise-
there's actually a great quote about beer, and it's brewers are people who interpret history and then use science to create art,
All right.
which is it's the most apt description of beer. I don't know that anything else exists and fulfills those kind of things the way that beer does. I really don't. And I agree. It comes down so much to how much you actually understand about the science to actually get the expressive characteristics out of the ingredients that you have to use in beer, because it takes so much.
Yeah.
You can make beer, but to make a really great beer, if you really don't understand where those flavors come from, where those compounds come from, it's not going to happen the same way.
Absolutely.
And that's it's a separation you see in this industry a lot. And I think a lot of people don't totally understand where that comes from. Beer is insanely expressive, but really the people that excel in this industry, or the brewers that you kind of hear about, the brewers that we will probably talk about, are the people who really knew their shit and knew exactly how to get everything they wanted out of the ingredients that they had available to them.
Yeah, if you're not good, right, you make check as fuck one day, and then the next day you're making check as heck.
That's
that doesn't work,
That's
it's gotta be
exactly
as
how
fuck
that goes.
every time,
It has to be as fuck every
It
time.
has to be.
Yeah, because you can fucking nail it. You can hit a bullseye on a dartboard sometimes,
Right,
but you won't hit it every time. And the dudes that hit it every time are the most knowledgeable, gifted motherfuckers in this industry. It's insane. And as beer has developed, really since the time that you're talking about, as beer has developed, those people have become more and more apparent how different those guys are, because it just their beer is the beer that we all fucking talk about all the time. It doesn't matter if it's made here or not. It's the beer that we're all talking about all the time. And I think a lot of people don't understand why it's so different and why it's so good. But really, that's a huge chunk of it. Is these guys really know exactly where their flavors are coming from. They know exactly what their paintbrushes are going to do, and it just it makes all the difference. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So Sean, you brewed in Arizona.
Oh boy, howdy did I.
Well, and compared to the rest of the country, there's not a lot of breweries in Arizona. Why do you think so?
At least back then, it was tough market to crack. It's it's hot as fuck. And there was one point where we were making great beers. Fantastic stout, but tough sell in Arizona in, 99, 2000. Made a Belgian wit, right? It was outstanding, and we could move that. And at some point, God bless our owner, because he, as much as we drug our feet on it, like, he wanted us to make a fucking light lager, and it sucked. We weren't feeling very craft doing this.
Yeah.
But God bless it, it sold, and it was
Gotta pay the
it
bills.
was at least a way to give someone, a choice as opposed to getting Coors Light or
Sure.
Bud Light.
Right.
And but it was tough. The bars down there just weren't open to receiving. I mean, as much as you could educate the people coming into your microbrewery, the sell on the streets was tough. Getting shelf space in a store was
That's so
God bless
brutal,
me,
man.
and
Oh my
fucking
God.
possible.
That's hard
That makes
today.
sense.
There
That's hard
wasn't
today.
really a lot of places that were focusing on, like, let's support the craft community,
Yep.
not in Arizona, and in a lot of the country. I mean, it seems like most of that stuff was, so much West Coast
Sure.
and East Coast.
Yeah.
A lot of coast stuff.
And really, this was not
And
even
if you weren't on the
25 years
coast
ago.
or Colorado, you were just kind of, you were hurting a little bit. Like
Sure.
you had to work a little bit harder for it. You
Right.
know?
Around that time, really, there was little things popping up like that, really all over the country, but just nobody, for a lot of the reasons you just said, like, nobody really got the exposure that they deserved. The internet probably changed a huge chunk of that, obviously, but there were really great things happening in little corners of the country, and they just, people didn't know that existed, or they didn't quite understand why this was better. And this was not even 25 years ago. It wasn't that long ago that things really started to change, which is also crazy that it's such a new development. And the West Coast especially. I mean, the West Coast makes insanely good beer, and we have a ton of it over here, of course. But for her, I don't know, for how many breweries that exist now that were that had started right around that time and now make some of the most famous beer that any of us really know about. It's super. I mean, I think, when was Alchemist started? They were
very early. They were one of the first hazies in New England.
Yeah, for sure. But they were making beer in the 90s as well, I believe.
Yeah, okay.
And now they remain, I think, one of the most famous beer producers.
Right.
And it was people really didn't know what was going on at that time. There were just people in these places that were like, I know that we can make better beer than what everybody's fucking asking for. I know that it exists. It's existed for 1,000 years. We just haven't even really tried that hard to dig into this. And then kind of all at once, really 25 years ago, everybody was like, fuck, we're gonna figure this out on our own. And now you kind of see where that's gotten us, which is, yeah.
I think the East Coast definitely had an advantage just because your access to imported beers was a lot more prevalent.
That is 100%
Right?
true.
So you got a lot of stuff traveling over. So
That's 100%
I
true.
think your market on the East Coast was a lot more educated than what a lot of folks opening breweries west of that were dealing with.
Sure. That's actually kind of where Tacoma is this weird sort of fortunate anomaly, because we had so many German immigrants who knew how to make really good fucking beer in the 1800s. And they were like, why are you guys drinking this shit? We can make really great beer here. We just need a few things. And then that's where, the light lager industry really was based off of old German Pilsners and Helles lagers that Tacoma specifically had access to, because we had so much German and sort of European immigration. And that's kind of how it all started. But I think you're right. The East Coast had this access, and then randomly Tacoma was like, oh, we can also do that because we have all of this insane knowledge coming here, traveling here, and then also wanting to drink really good beer while they're here. And then out of nowhere, we were just blessed with this crazy, blossoming industry that obviously things like Prohibition put a huge
Yes.
mute button on, but like that's really where it started, and that's like the East Coast is such a funny example of that because it's to a lot of people it's a highly developed craft beer kind of scene on the East Coast, and it probably does come from having easier access to historically better beer way early on. I mean, hundreds of years early on, right? Like, but Tacoma, weirdly, and maybe a few other select port towns also had that access around the same time. But they're just kind of, all these little kind of hurdles throughout history, the last 150 years got in the way. But I think that's a huge contributor, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah. And there's, a lot of the styles that people were hitting the market with too. I think the East Coast, particularly when it comes to Belgian style beers, they had a huge advantage as far as their market out there.
Sure, that's probably true.
Allagash being able to, Victory kind of threw down on everything,
every single
and that was
style, and nailed it.
Brooklyn Brewing, like there's a lot of folks out there, but I feel like they kind of had a leg up on that one.
Sure. But I think you're right. I think it comes from like easier access to like these really well-known historical, just top shelf examples of like great beer, and that influenced this entire side of the country. Basically, like they just had access to it. They developed their programs based on those styles, and then it evolved from there. And
I always think about Dogfish Head kind of coming out and just doing everything sort of excessively and crazy.
Sure.
And I feel without that sort of import base, and they were never shy about coming into a market at a price point that,
seemed
because that was another thing too. A lot of craft breweries were like trying to price themselves to compete with big domestic breweries, and that was
they were all racing to the bottom.
They were they raced to the bottom, right? Let's scrub some floors, right?
Yeah.
And Dogfish Head was one of the breweries that they were very vocal about. Like, no, we're craft.
Yeah.
We put in craft work. We make a craft product, and you're gonna pay a craft fucking price.
Yep.
And
our shit is the shit,
right?
But
that isn't really too different than a lot of your import price points. So
sure, that's true.
I wonder, what if Dogfish Head tried to open on? That might be different.
It might be different.
West Coast. I don't know. I don't know.
It might not be the same.
It might not be the same.
Well, shit. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't even think about it this way, but it's. I love the fact that we have somebody who got into this starting like writing about beer, and then, that's like your introduction to the industry, Ron, and then Sean's introduction to the industry was actual production, which is how your story kind of continued, really up until this, right?
You made a few beers in this town.
Yeah, made some beers in this town. A lot of restaurant work, but most recently to finish up the bio, I spent a lot of time brewing at E9. And by a lot, I mean, I don't know, 5 years.
Sure.
And it was a really interesting time. And definitely get into that
we'll talk about
later
that.
date.
We'll talk about that.
That was fantastic. And I've been here at the Parkway Tavern for at least 13 years now.
So, so similar question, I guess, is going. I mean, you a lot of your work was obviously in restaurant, but like your specific sort of craft beer work was in production, where you're not necessarily customer facing as much. You're putting a thing out that obviously you want people to perceive as a certain way. But what is different for you now? Like going from production to going to service. Like you're curating one of the most insane, incredible selections of beer in Tacoma for sure. But what changed for you? Like going from production to sort of like service and curation.
It was tough because I never really was just one or the other. I would brew during the day at E9. Actually, clean taps in the wee hours of the morning. Then I would go brew, and then I would come work at the Parkway.
Yeah.
So the two were never really. I worked at E9 4 days before I worked at the Parkway. That was it.
Yeah.
So I got to keep my feet in both sides, and I'm lucky for that. And I think that was a really important part of who I am.
Nice.
Yeah.
Tired.
Yeah.
Fucking tired, yeah. Yeah.
Damn, yeah.
What about you, Matt? How'd you get into this?
I know mine is. I'll keep mine quick because I think we're gonna wrap up in a bit. But like my industry experience actually comes from a totally separate side because I would consider my like current sort of industry identity to be mostly based on distributing brands, which is unusual, I think. But my first job was actually at the Harmon Brewery. I used to work for Mike Davis when he was there, winning GABF medals. You know, before a lot of us could drink. Not you fucking guys, but people like me before we could drink. I was like a 14-year-old shoveling Mike's wet grain, having no idea like the impact that guy was having on craft beer in this town. And you know, those guys have had such a complicated history in this industry. But my like, if craft beer is in my blood, it's probably because of that guy and that place, the Harmon Brewery. And I did a bunch of different jobs throughout high school and after high school, and you know, I worked at, you know, multiple places, kind of just doing regular retail stuff. I'm not much of a salesperson. I think I'm pretty shitty at it, but I do like talking about beer. And when I kind of like found my way back to this industry, really just being a part-time cashier at a fucking liquor store, when people would come up with a cool beer, I would like have questions about it, or I'd be interested in it. And then randomly, one of the other employees there invited me to like a sour tasting night, which I had no fucking clue what that was. This was 8 or 9 years ago now. And I didn't know sour beer was a thing. I took a bottle of Irish Death because I didn't know I didn't know what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And we had a bottle of 2013 Ruza from the brewery, which is like their sour barrel-aged blonde that they kind of blend the way you would a Guza. And I drank that beer and grimaced just like everybody else with their first time. And I remember distinctly being like at my job a couple days later, thinking about that beer, and my mouth just like, I was salivating for it. Like my mouth was watering. And I was like, God damn, like that was the most insane like food or drink experience I think I've had ever. And I'm obsessed with it now. I have been obsessed with it since that day, pretty much. I'm pretty. I don't know if you could tell that by everything about me, but I'm pretty fucking obsessive, and that was really it. That was like the trigger. And in fact, Mike Davis, who I worked for when I was a 14-year-old dipshit, had just started working at Narrows, and I petitioned our store to get Narrows beer on the shelf, and he personally came and did a tasting, and we kind of reconnected professionally after that, which was so nice. And at the time, I was studying for my sommelier exam because we had a sommelier at the store, and he was helping me out. And I was like, man, like this is, I don't know. I was a shit student and I fucking hated school, but I can read about alcohol and it seems to stick. So I'm going to take these tests. And then when Mike came and did these, I know, right? Like how hard is it to fucking study wine? But when Mike came and did the tasting, he was like, you know, there's a thing like that exists for beer. It's called the Cicerone exams. And I was like, fuck it. I changed my course immediately. And then I think within 2 years, I had passed my level 2 Cicerone exam. And then I got hired immediately at a large distributor because of that, I would say. And they told me it was because of that. Yeah. Got my ass handed to me because I was terrible at that job and had no clue what I was doing, but I figured it out somehow. Kept studying and passed my advanced Cicerone a few years ago. So I'm just one of a few in the state. And my whole point in doing those things, also, like on top of the fact that I was just shit in school and didn't really have like a degree to my name or anything, is like if I'm going to go for a professional certification, it should contribute to the thing that I would like to make an impact in. And beer ended up being that thing that I wanted to make an impact in really quickly, just because I fucking loved it so much. And I didn't even know what job I was going for. People would ask me what you wanted to, like, what do you want to do with this certification or in your career? And my answer would always like kind of half jokingly be like, oh, I just want somebody eventually to think that it's valuable to like pay me to travel around and try all the beer. And I've mostly gotten there actually, which is nice to say. But yeah, I left my old job to work for a small sort of boutique craft beer distributor where I am now, and yeah, it's been this insane career journey that's really only lasted like 8 years. Honestly, it's a young new thing for me, especially compared to the guys who have been writing about beer or making beer since, before the new millennium.
But you're level 3.
I am.
There's 3 in the state?
No, there's 5 now.
5 now,
yeah.
okay.
But it was. I think there was 3 or 4 when I passed.
Give me some names. We'll whittle down the list.
Yeah.
We know some people.
If I didn't adore those fucking people so much, I totally would.
All of them?
But dude, it's like Ron said, man. Like, you just meet people in this industry, and like, beer is so deeply fucking personal. And when you meet people who dig it the way you do, there's nothing but like absolute adoration for those people. I don't care if you work for a distributor that is trying to eat mine alive. If you really dig this the way that I do, I will advocate for you, and I hope you'll do that for me. And that's like, it's a thing that exists in this industry, and certainly in this town. But if one of them ever fucking slights me, Sean, I will text you immediately.
Yeah, man. I would like to get you into the top 3. I mean, whatever comes after, I just want that for you.
That's
I think you deserve it. So,
if we cap this episode off with you offering to do a hit job for me, I think that would probably be the perfect way to go out.
Yeah. Yes. It's a vast network in the craft community.
Jesus Christ.
A lot of grain mills out there.
Thank you guys for hanging out for the fucking pilot here. And yeah, this was fun, and I can't wait to do it every week.
I think it's a thing.
I think it's a thing.
Yeah.
Thanks again for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us at Grit and Grain Podcast wherever you get your social media, and catch new episodes every Friday. Cheers.
This is Channel 253.